Okay, so we are live now. Hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, based on where you've joined us from. Welcome once again to the 33rd episode of the IoT India Digital Conversations in partnership with Siemens, our presenting partner, and ETSI and TSDSI, our standardization partners, in the context of Indigo ICT standards and in synergy with SSI, the two EU funded projects. Together, we will explore a curated set of digital transformation focused themes and bring our global subject matter expertise onto the Digital Conversations platform. I'm Suman Bhaumik, your host for this series, and I lead the events development for the IIT in India. But before we begin our session, please allow me to take a couple of minutes and tell you a little bit about the IIT. The Institution of Engineering and Technology, also known as the IIT, is a global organization inspiring, informing, and influencing the engineering community to engineer a better world. As a diverse home across engineering and technology, we share knowledge that make better sense of the world to solve challenges that matter. At IT India, we want to grow actionable knowledge, want to solve India-centric engineering issues, and want to enhance people's lives using technology and thought leadership to drive innovation. There's a world of opportunities and knowledge which opens up once you join the IT as a member, but don't believe me until you see what we have to say in this context in this short video which I'm about to play now.
Get an opportunity to access thousands of technical journals, 300 plus online ebooks, magazines and journals through IET's digital and virtual libraries. 6,000 plus technical and non-technical videos via IET TV, extensive IET white papers and the award-winning E&T magazine. As part of your membership, access over 2,000 events, webinars and conferences conducted annually across the globe and gain knowledge and expertise. Be counted as the engineer's engineer with international qualifications like CEng, iEng, EngTech and ICT Tech licensed by Engineering Council UK. Professional registration gives opportunity to IT members to benchmark their qualification to international standards. Enhance your skills, knowledge and experience through our CPD programs. Get a chance to participate in the IET Present Around the World competition, Innovation Awards and Achievement Awards. These events celebrate and recognise incredible talent in the engineering and technology space. In India, the IET reaches far and wide through 8 local networks run by volunteers of the IET. These local networks provide a sturdy platform to network, learn, collaborate and volunteer through for a host of activities such as conferences, technical lectures and workshops. Students and young members can be a part of the IET through the 8 Young Professionals sections and 35 plus on-campus groups. Be a part of our sectors team working across 3 focus areas: future technologies, future of work and future of mobility and transport. Grab the opportunity to share your expertise and knowledge, network and broaden your horizons with the industry at large.
So that was about the IIT and us. If you want more information, you can visit our website www.theiit.org to find out more about what we do and what we offer. Um, so before we go about our session today, I wanted to take this moment to pay tribute to one of the legends of the IT and tech fraternity, as we find it hard to believe that the ever-smiling, energetic and affable Lakshmi Narayan Rao, also known as Lux Rao, is no more. He bid farewell to this world on the night of 24th of March, battling with cancer. The memory is really fresh because just a year ago we kickstarted this series, the IT India Digital Conversation, amidst the lockdown with Lux in its first episode. And then he was seen again in more sessions, either helping us curate them or helping us moderate them. However, his association with us and the IT is more than a decade old. He was one of our keynote speakers in the IT's Cloud Computing Conference in 2009. And from then on, his work, insight, and support has been of immense value in our quest of engineering a better world. He served as the chair of the manufacturing track in the IoT India Congress for 2 consecutive years, and in his words, created a cracker of a session each year. Along with Purnendu Sinha and other experts in the manufacturing working group of the IT's Future Tech panel, he created this platform to be the choice for the Indian manufacturing industry to leverage technology best practices, enabling them to become globally competitive. In his daily role, however, he was working with Entity Limited, earlier Dimension Data, as the senior director and leader of Entity Solutions Consulting and Digital Transformations. With his knowledge, expertise, and rich experience, Lux has been a leader in the space of digital transformation initiatives. And if you are from the tech fraternity, then I'm sure you must have crossed paths with Lux at some point of time. You will be missed, Lux, and deeply so by all of us and the massive community that you have built around you with your giving nature. Here is a small video which captures some of our best moments with Lux. There you have it. We'll miss you, Lux. Uh, but like always, you would always go about delivering a cracker of a session. We'll try our best today to do the same as we are discussing a very exciting topic, future cities, autonomous administration with blockchain, IoT, and AI. Though it's very difficult to match up to Lux's energy and charisma while he is off the screen or on the stage, uh, we'll try our best with the panel of experts that we have today to do justice to what this great man has accomplished. This episode today is curated by the Smart Cities Working Group of the IIT's Future Tech panel, and we are fortunate to have a global panel of experts who will discuss blockchain technologies that can leverage smart contracts to automatically implement city policies, predictive and preventive maintenance of energy, gas, water, and other utility infrastructure using technologies like IoT and artificial intelligence, future cities that are powered by chatbots, mobile apps, geospatial technologies, and the role of a chief digital officer in tying this all together. Now, let's begin with introductions. Introducing our first speaker for the session, Andreas Naubascher, who heads the IoT standards development at Deutsche Telekom. Andreas is working in the telecommunications sector since 1999. He was responsible for the development of national deployment plans for the 3G radio access network in Australia. In 2003, he joined Deutsche Telekom Standardization and IPR Management Group and represents Deutsche Telekom in various global organizations like 3GPP, ETSI, IEEE, 1M2M, and now at with the IT. Our second speaker is Chetan Sigahalli. Chetan heads digitalization and technology solutions at Siemens Corporate Technology. He is involved in research and development in the area of digitalization, development of MindSphere, the cloud-based open IoT operation system from Siemens, cloud-native platform development for industrial Internet of Things, Industry 4.0 development technology solutions in line with digitalization strategy of Siemens, which involves cloud-native technologies, machine learning, and advanced analytics. Our third speaker is Ishan Roy, Head Blockchain, Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency. Ishan heads the blockchain initiative as the Center of Excellence for Emerging Technologies, which is also called as CEET, at the Tamil Nadu E-Governance Agency, also known as TNEGA. He contributed to and coordinated the formulation of the Tamil Nadu Blockchain Policy 2020. He is currently working on Nimbikai Inayam, the Tamil Nadu Blockchain Backbone, and other e-governance initiatives or TNEGA. Our fourth speaker is Sharat Chandra, President of the India chapter of Government Blockchain Association, a global non-for-profit organization and advisor to Earth ID. Sharat also leads the blockchain advisory of the IT Future Tech Panel and has been actively working in blockchain industry for the past few years. He has advised many blockchain startups and taken offerings. Sharat is an author, keynote speaker, blockchain educator, and overall a brand name in and outside Indian blockchain industry. He also has a rich cross-functional experience in US healthcare, financial services, and IT. Finally, coming to our moderator for the session, V. Srinivasa Rao, also known as VSR, Chair of the Smart Cities Working Group of the IT Future Tech Panel, and Chairman and Managing Director of BT and BG. VSR has a unique blend of experience for over 2 decades in managing P&L of large-scale conventional IT and digital technology businesses, startups, and offering executive advisory to CXOs and senior business executives. He has proven operational playbook for designing and managing profitable businesses. Specialist in turning around the troubled businesses, mergers and acquisitions, he is capable of managing billion-dollar technology businesses and a recognized role model in maximizing the business performance. So without any further delay, I will request VSR to start the proceedings now and deliver an insightful and interactive session today. I'll be around if you need me, VSR. Over to you.
Thanks, Suman. Let me start my session by paying my tribute to my friend and colleague at IET, Laxrao. Laxrao, Om Shanti. I think we never forget the contribution what you made to the technology community. So with that note, let me set the context for this session today. So we have been experiencing autonomous vehicles or unmanned vehicles, so on and so forth. Artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, digital twins, and everything we are talking. But what about the administration or governance? Is it possible to make that autonomous? What does it mean? Can we optimize the human interventions, the way we manage the processes, the way we implement the policies, and so on and so forth? So with that context, today, if you really look at in the cities or villages, there is a lot of administration. I call it as the governance, what governments implement. While we improved in the last 75 years considerably in India, but still a lot of changes needs to be brought in. So we moved probably from the paper-based work to e-governance, and now we are talking about digital governance. And still, of course, we have not reached that maturity. Now we are also trying to see how this digital governance also brings nearly autonomous operations so that the citizens and the other stakeholders get better services. And the social, economic growth will happen in the city and at a faster pace if we really can bring the autonomous government administration. So we coined something called a software-defined smart cities under IET. So let me start my session because when I say autonomous, software become part and parcel of that city, right? So let me start with Chetan. So what do you think when we say software, I mean software-defined networks, software-defined data centers, now software-defined human bodies, software-defined human brains. So what is that software-defined cities, smart cities. And I request everyone to share their thoughts. Let me start with Chetan.
Thanks, VSR. It's a nice concept, right? So now, how far are we? Like, is it something that we will see tomorrow, day after? See, there are two things, right? So there is one that is the technology's capability to bring it to life, and then the second thing is the people's ability to utilize all of it, to consume all of it. Now, with that note ground, cities are little unique, or rather very unique compared to the other autonomous things that we deal with, right? One, it's a system of systems, and each one of them are extremely complicated. Now, in any city of a decent size, you have transportation system, you have utilities, you have governance itself, and so on and so. All of them are extremely complicated systems. So that's the first point. The second point is almost every city in the world is a brownfield. Like very rarely do you find a new city sprouting. I'm not saying it's not happening. It is happening in the Middle East, at least in a couple of places. But overall, most of these cities always existed, right? So it's brownfield. The third challenge that cities face is that it is a unique business model. On one hand, cities do not have competition, right? So like, of course, you can always argue there is competition, but by and large, cities do not have conventional competition. So that enthusiasm to change has to come deep inside. It is not mostly forced by the external factors. Now, keeping these two factors in mind, the ability of the technology to do it and the uniqueness of the city. Now, going to your question about what is autonomous city and how do you define, I define smart software defined smart cities. So bringing these two pieces together, my thing is there is certainly the technology that can make it happen. Now, whether the environment is suitable is always up for discussion. One other last point, and then I'll close it. The cities have much bigger problems to tackle today, right? So in the near future, we will see semi-autonomous. According to me, semi-autonomous, where the system tells what needs to be done, but there will always be some amount of human intelligence which will creep in and say, can we do this? I can give examples probably later in the session, but that's my 2 cents on this topic. Yes, sir, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks, Chetan. So what I would like to probably request now, Sarat Chandra, we are talking about autonomous and software-defined cities and all. So what do you think, where are we in terms of the government readiness? It's like system of systems, like Chetan mentioned. Maybe 20 systems might be there in a city. But changing them, digitalizing them is the biggest challenge, right? So what do you think the software-defined smart city means to you, and how much time you think you take in India to reach there?
Thanks, PSR, and thanks, IT, for providing me the opportunity to share thoughts on smart cities.
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So I would rather say that smart cities, they define a framework where we can use technologies, information communication technologies, and all emerging technologies to make cities more sustainable and solve problems which are plaguing all the cities as we speak. If you look at some of the reports, they quote that by 2030, more than 60% of the people will be living in urban clusters, and the problem's going to explode if we don't manage our cities sustainably. So, given that backdrop, we can't look at a complete autonomous smart cities as Chetan pointed out, but there has to be a coexistence with the existing model and the new models. And I think the government is doing a great job with smart cities mission, and with the recent liberalized geospatial policy, the government has opened up mapping initiatives, and it can be used to ensure that the data, all startups, all entities can now access to the mapping data, and brings innovative solutions with respect to mobility, transportation, and even disaster management. So I think these are some of the areas which will kind of propel the mission towards smart cities. But again, it's very difficult to put a timeline to it. But again, it will be again a collaborative effort, and with equal impetus from the government and collaboration with both startups and industry. I think we can reach that milestone, and we can reach that milestone if we set some reasonable targets in short term and long term. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sir. Okay, Andreas, I'm sure. So you have been driving so many cities-related smart city projects and all. So nowadays, everybody is talking about we are injecting software into everything. And Elon Musk is trying to inject the software into human brain, and we are injecting software into cars or machines or equipment. So now city is a system of systems, maybe 20 plus systems are there. So what you think of software-defined smart city means to you? Can you please share your thoughts?
Thank you for having me here in this round. My area is less smart cities. My area is more the IoT at all, so the more comprehensive stuff. But I think smart cities is a very good, let me say, use case, or let me say, showing up the challenge actually IoT has with, for example, collecting data from various sources, and having software processing this data and making something useful out of it. I think if it comes to smart city, I think I learned sometimes from colleagues from marketing, you need to point out the benefit for example, the users before starting with, let me say, explaining them a story about technology. I think it's particularly important also to point out the benefits for the politics, for the administration, because they need to, let me say, certainly there is some savings in let me say, resources, for example, or some savings in manpower you need, for example, to manage a city. And also for the users itself, or for the citizens itself, I think it's quite important that they see a benefit out of it. And what I learned from a colleague in Germany, for example, there is some kind of law which makes, for example, which says something like all the data being processed and originated in the public need to be shared with the public as well. And I think this is one point which is quite simple. It doesn't need much analytics. It's just something we see also adapting from people with looking at Google, for example. Google is sharing opening hours, for example, alongside with the address of a certain building or a certain site, for example. And this is already kind of benefit users taking on and enjoy. And I think also smart cities need to come in this direction as well to make it visible. Let me say that software-defined smart cities are a benefit for them as well. I think that's all from my side.
Super, that's fantastic. I think you talk about the optimization of the resources, whether it is human resources or other resources, and also the benefits to the users. That's very, very critical. So without that, whatever technologies, automation, nearly autonomous, it doesn't make any sense if we are not achieving those important objectives. Now with that, continuing that, Ishan, now I think you have been part of the government and all, but even today, if you look at most of the services, citizens have to spend a lot of time to get, for example, if any issue is there, you put a request, then the approvals will take a lot of time and the manpower availability at the government and all. So what do you think? I mean, are we talking too much of autonomous or semi-autonomous now? And this software-defined smart cities, can it be possible in India? So what do you think of that? Can you please share thoughts on that?
So thank you for the question, VSR. I believe it's an interesting viewpoint you have taken with the concept of software-defined smart cities. So if you look at what the Indian government is doing right now, there's a very interesting push or movement toward building standard protocols, standard interoperability standards, building technology stacks that can then be leveraged to build applications. The whole idea or the viewpoint, if you look at it behind it, is to get applications that can interact with each other, or to get various entities to interact with each other. So like you rightly mentioned, over the last decade, you've seen a huge push in digitization across all governments of India, right from the central government to the various state governments. But what we realize is the next step that you need to take is to get these departments, to get these infrastructures that you have, which are currently probably not communicating as efficiently with each other, to get to talk to each other and build applications and services which will service citizens better, right? So, like you rightly mentioned, if I have to go for one service that has to go through three departments. So why should I need to go through three departments? Why can't I build one service that on its own autonomously works across three departments? So as you see with the introduction of the NDHM stack, the India stack, and the various architectural standards, there is a push towards that, and I think we'll soon see that this will become a reality probably in the next 3 or 4 years. The concept of cities is very interesting here because cities provide you with an opportunity to design or plan a city that does not look at just tangible infrastructure but also IT infrastructure right from the start, right? So today cities have a on ground representation as well as a representation in the internet or in the cyber realm, right? So we are referring to the data of the various citizens, the data, transaction data being generated by the various applications. So cities give us a good opportunity to design such stacks, such modules right from the start. So let's say 5 or 10 years into the future, when it's operating at the maximum capacity, you can build applications that can interact with each other and deliver such services to citizens. Yeah. So that's my point.
Thank you, Sean. I think that's good. So I think if I understand right, it may take some more time for India to embrace this software-defined smart city concept. So incidentally, we are releasing IET Smart Cities Working Group. What is that city by 2035? How it looks like? So whether it is a semi-autonomous or a software-defined smart city and all, probably we will share it in the next 15-20 days time as a white paper. Okay, now coming back to one by one. Now we are talking about so many technologies. Sometimes I get scared. I put it all these technologies at one place in a slide. There are 20 technologies which probably impacting our lives, government, society, businesses. Okay, at a time, at least 10 technologies are impacting. So anyhow, we don't have time to talk about all those because all these technologies plays a very vital role in building these smart software-defined smart cities and all. Let me start with Sarat Chandra. Smart contracts, legally binding smart contracts. So today there is a lot of, I can say, noise and also hype. We are talking today the autonomous city administration. Governments means policies. The administrative officers strictly follow the policies, even sometimes it may cause delays and sometimes it is not adding much value to the citizens. Do you think with the smart contracts, can we really make sure that these policies delays can be minimized, where the manual interventions can be minimized so that citizens get great value?
Vesa, can you repeat the last part? I lost you there.
Yeah, what I'm asking is the governments basically, all these administrative staff or officers follow strictly the processes and policies. And there are so many regulatory laws, acts and all. So, but do you think how the smart contracts can really minimize the human interventions and making these all acts, rules, policies automatically implemented with smart contracts of the blockchain? Of course, there will be some legal implications might be there. So what do you see? What do you foresee? How the smart contracts of the blockchain play a role in the software-defined smart cities or nearly autonomous smart?
Right. So I would begin by saying that there's a need to identify citizens who are part of the smart cities. So a decentralized identity management system or a SSI can help smart city identify its citizens because with the influx of, let's say, immigrants into the city, right, or with the mobility of population we have into top tier cities in India, it's important to identify who are the real residents of the smart city first and look at G2G and both G2C workflows, government to government and government to citizen workflows, and try and use smart contracts to optimize the workflow processes. I'll just give you one example about driving license renewal. So the government of India says that now the renewal with Aadhaar linkage can be done online, right? But let's say if I'm staying in Bangalore for a certain period of time, and now I move to Hyderabad for for let's say a month or so, right? And my driving license is getting expired in that particular month, right? So it's important for a smart city to identify where this individual actually resides, so that these small processes of renewal can happen in real time. And these are all business logics, and they can be easily implemented into smart contracts with certain conditions. If at all there's some policy changes with respect to identifying digital signatures, right? Because as per the IT Evidence Act, I don't think we are recognizing digital signatures on blockchain. So maybe a minor modification to some existing laws will help uh, remove friction in automating some of these processes.
Right. But do you think there is always a possibility of the smart contract itself is written wrong? Intentionally, the policies are implemented wrong by the coders with some nexus. But how do you avoid that? How do you ensure that this smart intelligent software is not properly, is properly written?
Yeah, so that's where a lot of due diligence has to go in, right? And we have to look at all the pros and cons, what can go wrong, what can go horribly wrong, how we can mitigate those risks while designing logics for those smart contracts, right? So I think that's where a lot of maybe discussion would be needed if we're looking at multiple entities involved. Let's say if we're looking at different government processes, we need to kind of fine tune if there's a friction or if there's a discrepancy, so that we don't get into these small troubles, right?
Okay, thank you, Sharath. So I think a lot of work to be done. Especially, I think smart contracts may lead to some legal implications. Sometimes, if you implement the policies just by software, somebody may challenge it, and it is also not possible to implement every policy through software. Hybrid model may be required. So, one important key message here is in the journey of moving towards autonomous administration, blockchain smart contracts play a very vital role. I think governments, I'm sure Rishan Roy might be working on that, how the blockchain in Tamil Nadu, they will use all these smart contracts to make better services. Okay, now let me come back to Chetan. Chetan, I think the most important utilities for all our human beings in the city or any other places is water, gas, and energy. But today, it is possible to build the autonomous grids. It's a water grid, or it is a energy grid or a gas grid. Why human beings needs to go after the problem occurs and repair and spend too much money and the resources? Okay, why the downtime should be too much high? So don't you think Internet of Things, digital twins, and then artificial intelligence and sensors, all these things, if you bring together, is it possible to introduce by the city administration predictive and preventive maintenance, so that well in advance you can predict this is the place where the energy, the feeder distribution or water or gas problem is going to occur? I think go and fix it, reduce the maintenance operational cost and resource utilization. Can you please share your thoughts?
Sure. Thanks, VSR. That's a great question. So there are two parts to this question. Like again, I go back to how I started in the beginning, right? So there is the question can be broken into two parts. Okay, can the technology do it? Absolutely. There used to be a day where, or in the past, where like human beings wanted something to be done, but the technology was not ready. But today, that is not the state. The technology is available. The only point is, how badly do you need it? Is it the first thing that you want to go after? And looking at the city context, right? So there are so many things that you can do by just collecting the data. I can give you an example. So, like for those of you who are listening in from Bangalore, and I'm sure in your individual cities, you have traffic signals and there are roundabouts. For those of you who are in Bangalore, the Lal Bagh main gate, there is a roundabout. There are many, but then that's one many people would have passed through. Now, what's a roundabout? It doesn't have a traffic light, right? So just vehicles go around and there are 5-6 paths that they can take. Now, a traffic signal is something that comes to us immediately. The first thing that comes to us in an intersection is, let's put a traffic light. But then research has proven that if you introduce roundabouts, it reduces the fatalities by 90%. Okay, and this is research done in the US context. In Indian context, maybe like the intersection crashes are not fatal, but then like just play along. Okay, it's easy to construct, it's less expensive, but still the first thing that comes to us is let's put a traffic light. Now, why did I say this? That is because just because we have a bunch of technologies doesn't mean that we have to implement all at one, right? So that's the first point. The second point, in terms of can we do it, absolutely we can do it. We need infrastructure, we need things where we can collect the data. Now, first step, you don't need any high-tech tools and technologies to do this. So do such things so that the quality of life starts improving. As a second step, just collect data. Keep collecting data. And in many of the cities, at least in the Indian context, if you can stop pilferage, if you can stop wastage, if you can stop theft, there is so much you can do for the city's economy. Now comes the third step, which you mentioned, VSR, where what can we do with all of these technologies coming together? Now, utilities in this case, right? So drinking water. Again, I go back to the same thing, like flow meters are there. Like if you keep collecting the data, you can detect what is the type of usage. Is the quality of water fit enough to drink? Because now you have sensors which can detect, like the dissolved material. Is the pipeline old? And then there are very well defined algorithms which can tell you before something happens. Now, but the problem is these are as smart as the data that they sit on. So that is why we want to go back to the previous step and understand what is the problem that is plaguing the city. Is it creating an autonomous utility network, or is it still basic? Collect the data. So for me, I would do it in 3 steps. One, where I said, like use your common sense, do things that do not take huge change, and always question, like signal light versus roundabout. Second step, start collecting the data. And today, data collection can happen through various means, like it could be surveillance, it could be sensors, and so on. Third step, go to the autonomous, systems.
Sure. Thanks, Chetan. So I think, yes, there are some initiatives already started in India. But do you think, continuation to within 30 seconds, can you tell autonomous grids management, water, electricity, and gas in India? So do you see there is an integrated strategy, architecture, and resources to make it happen? And how long it will take for India to get there?
So, yes, sir, is this for me?
Yes.
Okay. So, meaning, as a, like there is no 30-second answer for this, unfortunately, because there are so many moving parts, right? So, does it justify? So, the grid, autonomous grids, yes, like most of the operations are done in an autonomous fashion. It is not that somebody will go and flip a switch and do things. It's done by machines pretty much in most of the cases. Water, yeah, probably a lot of it is still manual. Can we do it? Absolutely, we can do it. Is the technology available? Yes, it is available as on today. Now, do we have the incentive to do it? Do we have more pressing problems to solve before we come there? That is up for debate. So, meaning, I wish I had a crystal ball through which I could gaze and say in the next 3 years if this will come, but unfortunately, I don't know. I can talk about technology being a technology guy.
Actually, I always feel, even from IIT perspective, we always advocate that no need for all the cities or all the state governments needs to reinvent the wheel. There must be at the central level autonomous grids architecture or guidelines or platform if required. Why each state needs to spend millions of dollars and all? Probably for all these technological initiatives, there might be a focus at the central level to make sure that state governments don't reinvent the wheel and spend money. Anyhow, that's only an observation. Now let me come back to Andreas. And yes, I am sure as a human beings, we successfully screwed up the environment. I'm sorry to say that. Okay, and in the last many years, I think the amount of I think carbons what we are releasing to the world, we are polluting everything. We usually call five elements. Okay, so one of the things is air, and of course water is there and all. You managed some projects, my smart life projects. I think three, I think lighthouse city projects you managed, especially to manage the carbon dioxide, CO2, which is causing a lot of problems to human beings. Their survival itself is getting challenged. So, can you share your experience of using these technologies, whether whatever IoT or AI, ML, whatever technologies used, how you control the carbon dioxide in the cities, which is really becoming an alarming situation today?
Yeah, thank you for handing me over the ball now. First of all, so this My Smart Life project is something my colleagues was taking part. So I'm jumping in here for him, and I was in close contact with him on the developments there. So yeah, if it comes to AI and how those technologies can, let me say, reduce the emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions, this is certainly one of the key elements as well. But this AI and analytics is also a convenience factor for the citizen, and also for them to gain a positive attitude and also to see the benefit, what I said before as well. But let's take a look at the use cases, for example, at this My Smart Life project, which has been carried out with the EU funding in Europe. So what I learned is, for example, in Nantes, there was the smart public lighting was introduced. So with the aim to adapt the lighting to the urban life and to the life cycle of the people, In Hamburg, for example, e-buses have been deployed, and the load management was introduced, and also an e-charging infrastructure. A community car sharing concept was introduced and implemented. I think exactly this car sharing is something which is probably benefiting most for the CO2 emissions, because most of the times a car not moving. Most of the time cars are just parked somewhere, even on the street. Sometimes if there's a congestion. I also was visiting Bangalore for some time. And also the concept of a local logistics microhub was introduced there as well, to reduce the parcel delivery traffic on the last mile. So those are the projects or the use cases which have been introduced and carried out. But looking at those use cases from the terms of analytics, it's, as I said before, it starts rather simple. If just sharing of data, which is about opening hours of schools or administration or offices, for example, or shops, is reducing the traffic. So it starts rather simple. Switching on lights, switching off and on lights, for example, based on a presence, is something which doesn't need fancy analytics. It's like the roundabout you mentioned before. If it comes a bit more tricky, for example, to calculate the arrival time of a bus at the next bus stop and figure out whether the bus is loaded or not, is something which becomes a bit more tricky already and needs a bit more analytics and data. For the e-charging management, for example, it's becoming even more complex, because the duration a charger is being occupied depends on many different aspects and parameters from many different sources and even devices from different vendors. For example, such a charging station need to interact with multiple car brands, city information systems, public transport information systems, and so on. So, and here do I see the challenge, and the previous speaker mentioned it quite nicely. There are so many moving parts. And here exactly I see the challenges in the area of interoperability of data and gathering data from various different sources from different vendors. They all come along with their own semantics and meaning. So, and the more complex the use cases are becoming, the more components are interacting with the other.
In your address, I think I have a separate question for you on that. I think the interoperability and all. So here, I think if you, based on our conversation now, I understand we need to probably even restructure the city. As you rightly mentioned, the micro logistics hubs and community cashiers and all. So that means, do you think the city administration has to revisit the town planning, what they have done, and they have to first identify what are the changes they have to bring in, in such a way before you really getting into the technologies and all, maybe reducing the transportation time, reducing the movement of the people, vehicles and all. So is it possible for restructuring, like Chetan mentioned, a brownfield cities, or we have to build a new cities and move the people, new people who are coming into the cities to that place? Brownfield cities are very difficult to manage.
Yes, this is now a bit deviating from the AI, but of course it would be easier to have a kind of a greenfield approach. But in reality, the world is always a brownfield approach, and of course you need to adapt also to those habits and those technologies which are in the field. And from this point of view, of course, also, for example, the interoperability and gathering the data from various sources is quite important. And coming back to the point, if you have a standard, of course, the standard which has not been implemented in device does not bring that much. But for example, the technology I see quite important here for gathering and sharing data is for example, 1M2M. And in this context, for example, my colleague also in the Smart City Hamburg project exactly developed an interworking between a technology which is used by smart cities, kind of as a brownfield technology, with 1M2M to have a smooth exchange of data. Because once you have the data in the cloud somewhere in a unique format, you can do analytics quite easily. So then it's not anymore a big issue. It's more the collecting of data from the various different places.
Sure. Thank you so much, Andreas. Thank you. So, Ishan, I think you were instrumental in introducing blockchain policies at Tamil Nadu. Very quickly, can you share? Most of the times, the policies, I don't think any citizens go and read them. I'm sorry to say that, unless it is going to impact me, right? I don't think most of the people don't even understand and put the efforts. Common people, I'm talking about. So when you say blockchain policies, can you share one or two policies in Tamil Nadu, what you introduced in such a way on the blockchain related, it improves the citizen services and it improves the operational efficiency of the city officers or administrators. So what are the 2-3 policies? Can you share? That might be useful for other cities also to embrace. Very quickly, please.
I assume we are still referring to the blockchain policy, right? Some points of the blockchain policy.
Blockchain only. I'm talking about only blockchain policies. Because
Great. So something interesting we tried to do with our blockchain policy is that when we set to work on it, we realized that how is the viewpoint of blockchain implementation changing around the world. So previous to, let's say, 2018, you would see that everyone would be pursuing singular use cases, right? So you would see a single land transaction implementation or a single education certificate implementation. But what we realized is that there is a shift to building platforms instead of applications. If you look at Europe, EU is currently implementing EBSI platform or framework as part of their Connected Europe program, which is basically a platform which has a lot of plug and play modules that can be used for building blockchain applications. Similarly, Dubai is also doing that, and Estonia has been doing that for a long time. So the first thing we tried to do is that instead of focusing on individual use cases, we want to build a modular platform that can be accessed by all the government departments. And also we want the private sector to be able to access this platform as well, because currently building consortiums in blockchain systems is very difficult even for the private sector, right? So that's the approach we followed. Coming to your question of which use cases will make them efficient and which use cases will make delivery of services better, our approach to use cases is that we start with a very simple use cases where we are looking at, let's say, digital assets that are born on the blockchain. Then we move to digital assets that are transferable. So the example of the first would be something like an education certificate, which is essentially a digital asset that you hold for your life. The second, a digital asset that is transferable could be something like a license, a factory license or a warehouse license. And the third we are looking at is mapping physical assets to blockchain. So let's say rice, wheat, etc. These use cases are all focused on bringing in more efficiency to the existing processes. They focused on enforcing non-repudiation of digital data, something we could not do before blockchain, and they focus on interoperability. So all of these approaches will help make the delivery of citizen services better in the future.
Sure. Thank you, Ishan. Maybe I think you bring some innovation in terms of educating the common citizens on blockchain policies, having some massive sessions to make sure people understand the value of blockchain
No,
and the
definitely.
policy.
We have actually got a regular correspondence with citizens also on the policies. Every
Right.
2 or 3 days, we get feedback from the citizens.
Okay. Sure. Thank you so much. Now, let me come back to Sharath. Sharath, I think recently Indian government has made a massive change in the geospatial data policies and all. They liberalized, and that monopolistic approaches are gone now. So, with that approach of the openness in the geospatial data, what do you think the impact on the urban mobility or logistics transportation, and also I'm sure there is something like urban data exchange. Andreas mentioned that in fact the data is the most critical thing, the standardization is the most critical thing and all. With this all this context, can you please share your thoughts on this liberalization of the geospatial data and impact on the cities and the value to the citizens and the industry?
Sure. So this policy, I would say, after the telemedicine policy, which we saw last year, which came into effect and kind of revolutionized the last mile delivery of healthcare services, especially remote patient monitoring and all that stuff, right? So after that, I think this is the biggest policy shift with respect to data. And this also would make Indian startups competitive in the international space as well. And since you don't need many licenses to or clearances to start mapping data, you can just self-certify, and that will work. Private entities can self-certify what for what reason they are collecting data, and except for some defense limitations, the data is open to all. And the Urban Data Exchange, it's a secure open source platform which will empower entities, both private and public, to come together and build innovative solutions. So let's say if I'm talking about urban mobility, or let's say if there's an accident on the highway, right, and if you're getting data sources in real time, uh, the actual medical help can reach in time, and we can maybe alert other vehicles on the way, okay, there's an accident on the particular road, and the response can be more effective. When we look at logistics, I think if you're looking at the entire supply chain, where a certain amount of tracking has to be done through IoT devices, so real-time transfer of data using blockchain as a single source of truth can really make our supply chain or logistic systems better.
Okay, but do you think there will be some open data APIs? You will see flood of open data APIs from the startups and from the government, from the industry, because of this openness. So, what do you foresee in the next couple of years in terms of the open data interactions and value to different stakeholders?
I would say standardization will be key, and we have to make sure that whatever APIs startups are building, they need to be interoperable, so that the seamless flow of information or exchange can really happen. And that's the intent of liberalizing the policy, right, so that you have more people coming up and start offering mapping services via APIs. But again, standardization and maybe governance of those API standards will be crucial here.
So, do you think some professional bodies have to work on that standardization? I mean, I'm not sure whether really government can come up with that, or government and professional bodies like CII, FICCI, or NASSCOM in India. So, how you think this API total overall needs to be standardized? I mean, my next question is to Andreas. I will also talk to him to share the experience on that. What do you think, Sharat?
I think there has to be collaboration with both public and private bodies, and you rightly mentioned about bodies like CCII, or even let's say even IT can also contribute in
Absolutely.
best way possible. Right, what can be the best standards for data interoperability, so that you don't create another silo via APIs.
Right. Okay. Okay. All right. So I think a continuation to that, Andreas, I'm sure. So we talk about so much now till now. A lot of data is getting collated from different sources. So without standardization, and you will have thousands of different vendors, and they have their own standards. They don't talk each other in terms of the architectural constraints and all. So what do you think in a city, if it has to operate? Maybe it might be having 20 systems and maybe thousands of software applications and millions of devices. The data is coming from different sources, different telecommunication protocols and device protocols and all. What do you think the cities have to do to bring that harmony? It's like to drive it like a well-oiled engine. Rather, having too much of?
Yeah, that's a good question. Beside the organizational issues, of course, the technology challenges are quite huge. As I come to this IoT area, it was like easy, because from marketing point of view, people tend to categorize, to put everything on a shelf. IoT is the vertical home, industry, automotive, wearable, and even smart city is something like one put it in a shelf. But in fact, if you're talking about IoT, we are talking about linking of data from different sources. And in this sense, we are talking about, let me say, a complex software development project, especially in a smart city. So where we have entities interconnected among each other with smart devices, which supposed to act based on data generated by other devices. So that's quite critical. So from this point of view, I think I'm coming from the technology area, and I think the first point is it's well advised to have, let me say, a well-coordinated approach from a functional point of view, to look from a functional point of view on the task. To define an overall architecture is very important, before starting just implementing an API somewhere, even if it's standardized. So smart city is a really cross-vertical use case where the technologies from various areas meet each other. Hence, a vendor-independent core technology is very important to have, and because such a technology needs to be maintained over a long time and for the managers. If you run a city, it's not just 1 year. You need to maintain it, and you need to have a partner also available in 2 years' time. So this is quite important. If you have clear interfaces, for example, based on a standard, you can, let me say, split the task into pieces. You can say, okay, you're responsible for this part, and we meet each other in the middle. And if you have those clear interfaces, you can also do testing in between. And upon testing, you can do a certification. So you can rely on that the device or the solution is based on something it's supposed to work as it should be. And if you have a common data model, we are coming now to this area of data with a common semantics across different verticals. IoT solutions like in a smart city can benefit a lot of it. So because if the gas meter has the same semantic as the electricity meter and not independent from each other. And the last point I have in this area is, I think if we're talking about standards, it should be a standard which takes over a large chunk of this building block, and not only just looking or talking about a protocol, because often just an API is advertised as the solution as such, like NGS ILD or just a protocol like MQTT or LoRa, for example. In fact, you need to look for the big chunk that you can solve a big area of the problem by one standard. And in this sense, for example, you mentioned, someone mentioned at the very beginning, TSDSDI, for example, is also one of the partners of the 1M2M partnership project. And this is a standard which is not, let me say, the smart city standard. It's a standard for IoT, but it solves a lot of those problems, leading to a lot of discussions for the partners. It's already solved upfront by this standard, by this technology. And I think this is also then easing a little bit the challenge of the organization of such a complex software project.
All right, thank you, Andreas. I think one key message from here is, I think most of the times cities may spend a lot of time to develop something, design and build, but forgetting that it is 100 years, right? As you rightly said, a city means it's not like just 1 or 2 years, right? So then what is that maintenance and operational cost if you don't follow the standards, if you don't really bring that harmony across the multiple systems and all? It might be too expensive where this digitalization will fail. I think the 100, 150 years horizon needs to be looked at, not just 3 years, 1 year implementation time. That's what we usually call project life cycle, right? Cost or project life cycle, how we can manage it. Thank you so much. Now come back to Ishan. Again, I think you are a blockchain specialist. I would like to talk to you. While in these cities, education, health, and other things are very important, let us spend some time on health.
Sure.
In India today, most of the money is spent from the pockets of the individuals, unlike in the other countries. Okay, I think if I'm not wrong, US, I think people spend only 13% of their money for the healthcare and remaining government bear it. But
Right.
now the blockchain is there. For example, my electronic health records. Okay, if you go to one hospital, they maintain a big file. Another hospital, another file. There is no something like a sharing of data across the practitioners. Whether it could be, I mean, it is very sensitive, and there is a privacy issues will be there. And in one of the state governments, when we were talking, they were also talking about how to save the DNA data into blockchain so that nobody can tamper with that, because this is something like very, very confidential information. So can you share some thoughts on how and what city administration can do to make sure that the healthcare facilities with these electronic data records and blockchain can be improved?
Sure, sure. So let me start with the caveat that my personal opinion is that blockchain is not a silver bullet. So when it comes to healthcare, there are specific scenarios that I believe blockchain is well suited for. But if you look at the approach the central government is following with the NDHM stack, right, the National Digital Health Mission stack, that will definitely help us a lot when it comes to sharing data between various medical practitioners and maintaining electronic health records of data. However, like you rightly pointed out, there are certain aspects where blockchain is extremely suitable and it can probably work as a tool which will partner up with, let's say, the NDHM stack. So, like you rightly mentioned, when it comes to consent management, when health records are being shared between various medical practitioners or certain fields have to be shared, there blockchain is suitable. Like you were talking about storing DNA information. So while a shared peer-to-peer ledger like blockchain may not be suitable for storing a lot of DNA information, and definitely not because for reading and writing DNA information you need a very fast system where probably something like a GraphDB is more suited, right? So blockchain could probably be used as a crypto anchor or a truth anchor over here, where you store a hash of the DNA data on blockchain and probably use it as a reference point in the future to check the authenticity of the DNA data. I'm sure the case of tracking provenance with blockchain everyone is aware of. So that's a massive problem blockchain can solve. So essentially eliminating fake drugs and sort of certifying the genuineness of the generic drugs and the drugs that we purchase from our favorite pharmaceutical shop, so to say. Apart from that, and probably the large role that's being played by IoT and smart devices in healthcare today, there also blockchain can probably play a prominent role. So, like someone rightly mentioned, that when you talk about smart cities, you're basically 90% of your conversation is about IoT devices, right? So, a lot of challenges that IoT devices face could be solved by blockchain. So, for example, you could build a DDoS proof systems using blockchain. You can probably help distribution of internet across various IoT devices better using blockchain. And this is one of the interesting projects that people around the world are working on. So probably blockchain will not play a huge role when it comes to solving the existing problems with healthcare, but it's definitely a tool that can help solve some of the ancillary problems that are there. That's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you. So probably I think if what blockchain bring in, and also the tamper-proof ability, if electronic health records are maintained and all the doctors anywhere in the world can access that, I mean, there is no need doctors to ask the patient to tell me the history of what problems they have. I think the blockchain can really help upon the consent of the patients anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So now coming back to Chetan. Chetan, I think. Yeah. So if anybody is not using, can you put on mute, please? All right. Chetan, I think we progressed very well. Countries like India and of course the developed countries also there. So mainframe to mini frame, client server, internet. We all started with client server era and then internet. Now we are talking so many technologies. So governments also moved slowly from paper based to this and all. Now still they are in the e-governance era. That's my probably understanding and belief. You can challenge me. So the electronic governance era is there, but still, I think when governments you think move to digital governance era, like what we talk till now, the autonomous grids. If not autonomous, it's okay. Automated grids to some extent, semi-autonomous, blockchain smart contracts, IoT devices, standardization, so on and so forth. That means new set of applications have to be built. Till now, I think most of the applications built by government or city administrations are systems of records. They are to perform the transactions. But we need systems of things dealing with the IoT devices and other intelligent things. We need systems of engagement where the mobile, social, personalization, and then systems of insight where artificial intelligence, machine learning, the autonomous. So that means the application portfolio itself is getting changed completely. We cannot live in the past. So there are two questions. One is, are we ready to move from e-governance to d-governance, the digital governance? If so, then what are the changes the city administrations have to bring in? Is there any significance for the chief digital officer for a city?
Thanks, VSR. So, meaning it's a very comprehensive question which covers multiple aspects of it. I will have to probably take a couple of points and try and give my opinion. The first part that I understood is, like from e-governance to digital governance, how mature are we? Any system for that matter, right? Typically, there is infrastructure that is set up. When I say infrastructure, like you can substitute anything there. So to give you an example, in the US, they built roads, right? And when they were building roads, there were automotives, there were automobiles, but the automobiles did not take off till the road network was mature, was very smooth. And then if you see the graph, like the automobiles took off like this. The same thing with computers, right? So in the 90s and even till mid 90s, people said, like computers were supposed to increase the productivity by leaps and bounds. But nobody was seeing that, at least not in the economy, was it being witnessed. But then again, you see that, like it went up like this. The same thing with electrical grid, right? Electricity was there, like Edison tried to electrify the city of New York long ago. But then again, it took off once you have the grid in place. Similarly, even in the city governance, I think there are that pavement that needs to be laid out. And the pavement is what Andreas was talking about in terms of standards, like Ishan was talking about in terms of policies, like Sharath was talking about, like how these different agencies should contribute, which actually is happening. BSI is kind of inviting all of these companies to come in and advise them on what kind of standards, right? What is the kind of ambient light sensor you should do? What kind of protocol should it work on? What kind of bandwidth and so on. So these are all pieces, right? So this is the pavement that is being laid out so that the city can move from wherever they are. Now, again, all of the cities are not even at e-governance, but then they will get there someday. And then from there to digital, because now, what is the difference? The sources from where you collect the data, they keep changing. You keep adding more and more sources of data, right? Today, the data is mostly coming from your land records. The data is coming from your health records and so on and so forth. Slowly, it starts moving to grids, like your smart lighting systems, your traffic systems, your metro, and so on and so forth. So for me, like that pavement needs to be laid out. And that pavement is made up of all of these tiles. One tile is standards. The other tile is, the policies and so on and so forth. Now, in India specifically, with the 100 Smart City Mission, Ministry of, like Housing and Urban Affairs, MOHA, they are already doing it. They are trying to see if you build an application for the city of Amaravati, can you use that in city of Bangalore or in Trivandrum? Is that possible? And how do you do it? Now, cities have this strange conundrum, right? While on one hand, they want to support startups, but then any city does anything with a company, it is marriage. It's not a short-term relationship, right? So they are more worried about what happens tomorrow when the startup stops being a startup, one, or it completely disappears. Now, will I be holding like 20 different systems I don't know what to do with, right? So all of these now, meaning I know I confused with my thoughts, but then, like that is how the reality is also. It is a pavement made of different tiles, but once those tiles are laid out, I'm sure, like the same thing that happened with the electrical grid, the automobiles, and computers will happen in the world of digital governance. That's my opinion.
Fantastic. I think that's very good. So that's the point I think I was trying to emphasize. There is a need for whatever the role you call, whatever that pavement, the building blocks, the standards, the policies. There might be one role responsible for all the whether 100 smart cities or 500 Amrut cities and all. I think who can take that accountability? Like I think Nandan Nilekani took that accountability for this Aadhaar. Somebody should take that accountability and responsibility at the central government, probably. You call them as a chief digital officer of India and then our chief city officer of India, making sure that the building blocks are designed, architected, and every city can embrace it. Of course, that's my probably key message, which I think we need to really look into that.
So, yes, sir, I will take you to the next meeting with the 100 Smart City Mission. It typically happens every 2 months or so. Like the government is willing to listen for sure. And there are like really amazingly smart people looking at how do we make this happen.
Right.
And we meet every 2 months or so once.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chetan. Anyhow, IET, we want to contribute for this nation and to the world. So I think we should not waste the resources. And at the end of the day, like Andreas mentioned, we need to keep in our mind what are the benefits we are passing and what are the operational excellence in terms of optimally utilizing the resources are the key. Technologies cannot become the overheads or we can't become the slaves to technologies. With that, Chetan, I want to continue slightly with this question. Okay, we talk about, maybe it is too early, maybe I'm talking, with the state of what we are. So do you see in the next 2 years, 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, robo taxis or something like air taxis in India, where Dubai already doing that? I'm not sure about Andreas if anything happening like that, where you have to improve a lot of ATC. That means the ATC has to be completely redesigned, right? The traffic goes up too much. Then I'm more worried about CO2, Andreas. Maybe Chetan and Andreas can share some of their thoughts.
Andreas, after you take the difficult part and then I follow it.
I don't know what to answer, to be honest. But I think I personally, I'm amazed about the technology. What we are jumping ahead from the past. From what we achieved in certain stuff. Because I need to, let me say, reschedule or revise my attitude I had in the past. But for some stuff, I'm not very, let me say, enthusiastic either. Because sometimes technology or let me say some of these we are driven by kind of buzzwords, and sometimes the reality is a bit lagging behind, and that's where we are, because we are still talking about, okay, we have engineers and academia is able to, let me say, develop something quite quickly, but then we are talking about, let me say, we need also to keep the trust of people and the citizens, the users, and I think this is quite important in this respect too. So it's not done just applying something software defined if nobody, let me say, sees an advantage in it. And especially the challenges, for example, you have, for example, building up something, you also were talking about responsibilities and accountabilities. This is also something that the structures we have currently, for example, also in cities, or let me say, in organizing such a project is sometimes quite deviating, because sometimes there's no one accountable for something. In cities, sometimes the digitalization is done by someone, by a public servant who is just doing a side of his normal work. You cannot blame him that he cannot spend dedicated time for, let me say, developing a software architecture for it. On the other hand side, we have companies driving, saying, okay, this is my product, look, there's smart city written on it, you need to buy it. They say, okay, you get it, And then after 10 years, the company is not anymore there, and then you look around for who can repair this stuff now. And exactly this is the challenge we have now. Okay.
All right, thank you. So quickly,
Yeah,
please,
yeah. So again, it's today it sounds more of a philosophical question. So like James Bond once said, "Never say never." So I'm not the one who will say this will never happen. First point. Second point, before you get the robo taxis and flying machines and stuff like that, there is a lot of policy changes that need to be implemented. And technology, as Andreas said, is meaning I'm not undermining the complexity there, but then my belief in technology has gone up multifold since the last 8-9 months, the way the world came together to find a vaccine and administer it. And also I'm a firm believer that technology science can always do if needed. The question is, do we need it? That's the first question. Second question is, how badly do we need it? Like for all its superpower capabilities, US spends 18% of their GDP, of their roughly $16 trillion GDP, 18% is spent on healthcare. Still the biggest problem they have is interoperability. Yes, sir, what you were talking about, right? So you walk in, you don't know, somebody will say, no, go get that test done. And this is today, right? And it took like 2 presidents to just do something that it is all streamlined. And still they are not there. So, like there are complexities. The belief in science and technology always exists. It can make it happen. How bad is the need? How badly do we need it? And then the next aspect is, like what do we get out of it? There are so many other things that we need to do there. That's one point. The second point is, I don't see robo taxis, but I surely see drone deliveries happening. It's already happening in some places, but I think it will continue to happen in many of the places. Like especially delivering medicines and things like that. And who knows? Meaning, I wish like it happens in my lifetime. Certainly, and it also takes courage to take such taxi.
Sure. Thanks, Chetan. I mean, this is the reason I'm sure all the governments are putting tremendous efforts in terms of bringing the changes in the policies and procedures, how they move. I think we, like the people from the industry and also from the technology background, probably need to also work with the different entities. That's the reason IET in India Smart Cities Working Group first want to give an imaginative city by 2035. I mean, it is a dream. I mean, after all, most of the countries now, if you see, United Arab Emirates has a 2071 plan. That means, I mean, without dreaming, without imagination, nothing will happen, right? Okay, it might take 30 years, it doesn't matter. But you have to see that if my 20 years or 15 years, if my city to be like this, then you say that 15 years, what policies needs to happen the first year, or 3 years, or 6 years, or 9 years, or 15 years. I think that's where I think probably Niti Aayog and the other professional bodies probably need to work in India, because this is not an easy job like what we speak here. And some people also might say, what you spoke today is a sci-fi, not reality. You talk about blockchain, smart contracts, autonomous grids and all. But the whole objective of today's session is we need to break that monotonous thoughts. We need to ignite the spark to think different. We need to imagine how the future will be, and we need to start working towards that. It may take 15, 20 years after our generation, people may enjoy it. So with that, I have a last question for all of you is, do you think this software, the technologies, whatever we spoke, contribute for increasing the economy of the city? Today, most of the cities are making losses. If you ask anything, they say don't have budget. Even the city where I am living today in Hyderabad, we approached some of the municipal corporation people, they mentioned they don't have budget. Right? That's one. That means the technologies must improve the economy of the city. Number two, does it include social inclusion? That means the different, I think, without any bias. So social inclusivity is the second. Third, upholding the cultural traditions what we have, which are the best practices. So can you please share your thoughts? Then we can probably get into a very brief Q&A. Very quickly, I request everyone to conclude in 30 seconds each.
Right. Yes, sir. I would like to come in first and share one example about Indore Smart City. So the commissioner of the smart city is saying that she will be able to garner 25 lakhs through carbon credits. And that smart city is part of UN climate change, and they are also part of the verified carbon scheme of the US. So all the smart cities are involved in green mobility and green energy initiatives, and they do accumulate carbon credits, right? So why not have a mechanism? Why not have a marketplace for all the smart cities in India? We have 100 smart cities, right? And they all are engaged in different initiatives. Why not trade those carbon credits with each other and also the bodies in Europe or US where exactly the carbon credit market is, and you make some money out of it? Because India, as we speak, is sitting on a stockpile of carbon credits, and there are certain challenges with respect to verifiability of those carbon credits, and that's where blockchain-based carbon credit marketplaces are taking off in both Europe and US. And we can maybe take a leaf out of that and implement those projects, starting with, let's say, Indore Smart City or, say,
Sure.
Bangalore
Thank
Smart
you.
City to begin with.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, quickly.
So can I go ahead? Yeah. So
Please
one
go
of
ahead.
the interesting things we are looking at is, so this blockchain platform that we are building, how can we turn it into a revenue generator, right? Because like I mentioned earlier, creating blockchain consortiums for use cases like Sharath was mentioning for carbon trading, etc., carbon credit trading, etc. It's very difficult for a private sector entity to do. So can we turn this into a revenue generation mechanism where people come and use the platform as done with Aadhaar or UPI, etc. Right? So that's one of the interesting things we are looking at. Similarly, you could do this with AI modules, existing trained AI modules. So, for example, right now we don't have an acceptable trained model in computer vision for recognizing Indian faces. We are still working on that, and also for recognizing Indian languages, right? So maybe the government can develop these for projects that are e-governance projects or digital governance projects, and then lease them out to the rest of the industry to use.
Okay.
So those are certain revenue generation.
Thank you, Isha. Okay, Andreas, do you want to share something on social inclusion, economic growth, how these technologies can help? We don't want technologies for the sake of passion or fashion.
Okay. Okay, I'm passionate about this. First of all, I already talked about social inclusion and that the people, the citizens need to adopt this technology and they need to get, let me say, a benefit out of it. And I think the cultural benefit is also something for the economic part as well. Of course, cities, they can't spend money, and there's always the point we don't have money to invest. On the other hand side, I'm quite sure there are savings you can see on the other hand side as well. So what do I mean? I think it's important to show the benefits and to make it clear, because sometimes, from our organizational structures, we are put in boxes, or even in companies. Sometimes, some department or division is saving money, but the other department is, let me say, need to pay for it, And sometimes the department paying for it says, okay, no, I don't have a benefit, although the savings for the whole overall would be huge. And I think the same is for the cities, if you introduce something, you need to show the overall benefit for the society and also for the city. And then I think hopefully someone will be clever enough to say, okay, let's give it a go.
All right. Thank you, Andreas. Chetan?
Yeah, VSR, in terms of inclusion, I think we have a unique advantage compared to the West. On the contrary, like people might think that, like there is little bit of less digital awareness, but I feel, like there is a big advantage that India carries. The case in point is the vaccination. I took my mother to get her vaccinated, 10 minutes in and out, done, a digital certificate in her cell phone. She's 67.
Right.
So, and nothing, I didn't have to do anything. Unimaginable. I spoke to my colleague in Netherlands. She said, like I might get in the month of May, and I don't know, they might even scribble on a piece of paper. So what am I trying to say? We have some of those styles already, right? So that is the inclusion part. So now if you make it available, it will be lapped up by the consumers. which in this case is cities. Then I like what Sharath just mentioned, right? The marketplace for a city. Now, instead of every city looking at their problem as it is unique to Hyderabad, unique to Bangalore, I think with this 100 smart city mission, if there is a marketplace that emerges and say, I have created a smart city application, these are the standards, you don't have to do anything, just go to a city store, like we call that like an app store, a city store,
Yeah.
download. I'm obviously oversimplifying it, but then you guys get what I'm trying to say, right? And then use it. So money is a constraint, but can be overcome.
Okay, so Suman, do you have any questions from the audience, or can you check it once, please, Suman?
Suman, if you are talking, you are on mute.
Yeah, Suman, you are on mute. Yes. So, okay, so I think what is the most important thing in the meantime is how do you prepare for the future? I mean, there are so many challenges, problems, and etc. But end of the day, as I think we discussed, I have something like a grid saying that I want to improve the GDP or per capita GDP of the citizens in my city, where the digital interventions required. Or if you want to reduce the carbon dioxide and improve the environmental sustainability index, so what are all the changes I have to bring in, how the technologies will help? If I want to improve the citizen services without hassles, then what is that technologies will help? I think the outcomes have to be the driving forces. I think with that outcomes, probably you say that 5 years I want to improve this, 10 years I want to improve this, 15 years I want to improve this. Then you come up with what are all the changes you can bring in the policies or processes or physical infrastructure, so on and so forth. I think that top-down approach might help the cities to have more returns on investment, whatever the investments they made, I guess. So, Suman, are you back? I think we are not able to hear his voice. So, any concluding remarks, friends? I think we can probably conclude the session. If any comments you want to share.
Okay, I can go first. Suman, are you trying to say something?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Okay.
I just
Yes, you're back now. You're back. You're back.
Yeah. Sorry about that. We were just discussing the things with technology. So we've got some questions. Quickly, if we can take another 2 minutes and take a few of them. I think there is one which is from Vinay Rajagopal, who wants to ask, how do you manage the privacy concerns on blockchain? Because what I put on a ledger is immutable. Would this be applicable only for non-private or sensitive data?
So can I take that question?
Yes, please.
Maybe. So one of the important things we look at when we are designing blockchain applications is what you want to put on the ledger. Let's not forget that we also have a PDP bill in circulation right now, which has a clause about right to be forgotten, right? So it's important that you don't put any personal data in the original form of the blockchain, because that might be a conflict with the law in the future. So, like you rightly pointed out, privacy is a big concern. We make sure that when we are designing the system, we take into account what data is being put on the system. And obviously, we also work with private ledgers and private channels to ensure that data is available on a need-to-know basis between the stakeholders on a blockchain network. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks, Ishan, on that. The next one is from Pankaj Sahai, who asks, why don't we mandate open standards for smart cities like W3C, IETF, or standards and interoperability? That is his question. Would you want to take this, or Chetan?
Yeah. So, meaning maybe Ishan wants to come after me, but this is already happening. As I said, the industry body, along with the government, has already initiated. There is a lot of emphasis on setting the open standards, and specifically in this case, 1M to M. And there is work that is going on, and like as I said, if there is any practitioner who's interested in contributing, I can help connect, starting from what kind of power consumption to what kind of protocol, the range, the network, everything is being defined. And there is a huge emphasis on open standards. In fact, anything that is proprietary is being mercilessly shot. Yeah.
Yes, Andreas. Thank you. Thanks for this.
Okay, may I follow up on John? I think he's completely right. So, and that also with regards to W3C and IETF, those are standards, open standards. And for example, in reference to 1M2M, 1M2M is a technology using exactly also those technologies inside. It's just a bigger bundle. You have a basket. You're not just talking about an API. You're just talking about a whole system coming with an architecture. It's comparable to 3GPP. It's 3GPP is doing mobile networks, for example, cellular networks, and they are also reusing technologies standardized by someone else. So it's already in. And by the way, India is doing great in this regards, because those standards like 1M2M are also recommended by even the Indian government, for example. It just needs products based on this technology.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrews. The next one is from Francis Souza. Smart contracts without regulations will marginalize citizens, is what he's saying. India is yet to define regulations which, in quotes, won't be based on immediate ethical experiences. How long would it take to implement a proper regulation structure for smart contracts? Ishan, you would want to take this, or Sharad?
Sure, maybe Sharad can chip in as well. So one of the interesting things about the IT Act is that it's very forward-looking. So it already talks about electronic contracts and using computer hashes for authentication, etc. So, like Sharad pointed out very rightly earlier in the session, you need very minor modifications, but obviously you need essential modifications for smart contracts to be accepted as valid legal instruments for implementing certain decisions. Apart from that, what is also important is to look at it as a case-to-case basis. So, apart from the IT Act, there are also specific laws that mandate that there is a certain way or there is a certain compliance that needs to be followed. So, there's a certain way that land transaction will be accepted as a legally accepted transaction, right? That meets a few standards. So, which requires a person to be physically present and to sign the document in front of a registrar. So, this goes beyond the IT Act as well, where you have to change the way certain workflows or certain operations are carried out right now, right? So, to answer your question, just to summarize that in terms of smart contracts being accepted, probably minor modifications to the IT Act, and for them to gain wider acceptability, probably look at individual use cases and work on them.
I think maybe VSR here. I would like to. So while we talk about minor modifications or major modifications, like Francis mentioned, I think these smart contracts, mostly the legal aspects have to be looked at very carefully, because a lot of things I think executed automatically without human interventions. There will be so many legal implications. That's where, if you know, ISO 9000, ISO has been working. Even I am the member of BIS, Bureau of Indian Standards. They are developing a standard for smart contracts. That means legally binding smart contracts. Okay. So if you take a contractual agreement, and not everything can be translated to intelligent software code, but few things can be translated. But if you translate and execute it, is it okay? Is your law, is your judicial system allow that it accept it or not? I don't think those are all the aspects factored in our IT law. I think some more changes have to be brought in if you want to make the smart contracts legally acceptable. Thank you.
Right, that's something I currently it talks about ISO 27001, but it should upgrade to whatever PIS or ISO is working on.
Okay. Yeah, come on.
And to VSR's point,
Your two
I would
cents.
like to say that we also have to look at arbitration with respect to these smart contracts. If we run into a dispute, right, how our existing laws can handle those arbitrations.
Correct.
And recently, even the judicial system, they're looking at online dispute resolution. And maybe some aspects of those dispute resolutions can be automated through smart contracts. Maybe minor ones, let's say insurance renewals and maybe refunds, e-commerce refunds, and any dispute arising out of that. Majority of them can be automated with certain defined logics, I would say.
Right. Okay. Thanks, sir.
Thanks.
Nisha.
And closing in with the last question, which is from Ankush. It's a pretty interesting one, and though a very basic question that we ask ourselves. Our government and the policies change after every 5 years. Who will ensure the same vision is carried forward after the change of the government? Since we're talking about life cycle and the next 100 years, how do you envision this happening? Anyone? Sharad?
Can I answer that? So let me begin by talking about the 5G policy. So even for the 5G rollout, right, the Department of Telecom is saying that we need to rewrite certain sections of the Indian Telegraph Act. Now, as we speak about 5G race, I mean, we are not there yet. We're still catching up. There are countries who have jumped onto 6G standards, but Indian government has done a partnership with Finland for 6G. So policy making has to be very forward-looking, and you can't have a policy which can cover all the aspects, but again, make enough room for inclusion going forward. That's what I would like to say.
Thanks, Sharad.
Okay.
I think
Yeah.
we have taken in most of the questions, BSR.
Yeah, if anything comes out, we can probably capture them and release it. Our working group will probably try to release a sort of a question and answer document. Thank you, Suman. I think we had a wonderful discussion, but this is a huge topic. We are talking about transforming the complete city. Like Chetan mentioned, I put a question which needs probably 3 hours of an answer. I asked him to give in 30 seconds. So that may be unfair. So, but at the same time, so what I fundamentally believe is, I think we need to have a dream or a vision. That's where I think IET Smart Cities Working Group coming out with Vision 2035, what a city looks like. And from that, we want to invite the academic institutions, industry, government to participate. If we want to realize this vision, what policies needs to be introduced? What procedures or processes needs to be changed or new needs to be introduced? What physical infrastructure is required? What is the existing physical infrastructure needs to be instrumented, made them intelligent? Okay, it's like top-down approach and all. So this may be a 15-20 years journey if you want to realize. That's where we said Vision 2035. So a lot of, I think, work to be done by all of us as responsible citizens and also industrialists and professional bodies. Thank you so much for everyone for sharing wonderful thoughts, experiences, and I look forward to work with you, take a lot of guidance and help in terms of the Vision 2035 document of the smart cities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, sir. Andres, Chetan,
Thank you too.
Thank you.
Ishan, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, everyone who could join us from the audience. We have a varied audience from India as well as other countries. Thank you for taking time. Please take care, stay safe. We are still, very well into this pandemic.
Yeah.
And though the vaccine is around the corner, it's still good to take precautions. Take care. For fellow Indians, it's a long weekend. We would wish everyone a very happy Holi, which is Festival of Colors. And we'll see you again in our next episode on the 9th of April, which is another interesting one. Actually, 9th of April is the World IoT Day. 7th of April is the World Health Day. So we are coming up with a topic on telemedicine. The name of the topic is Doctor on Call, ? Scaling telemedicine or telehealth in India. So that's what we will discuss next. We'll see you around. Until then, take care. God bless you and have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye, everyone.